Good evening, everyone. I want to thank everyone for being a part of this happy hour tour today. This is actually our second installation of this Here's Looking at You. We had our first run last week, and it was a great success, so we decided to give it a go and do it again for y'all. So we thank you all for being a part of it today. And today, right, we will be talking about the gaze. So first and foremost, I wanted to pull this up on the screen. This just kind of gives you a little understanding about Zoom since we're all kind of new to this. There is a chat option here, and you're able to, if you'd like, you can either enter questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. As you see here, there's the mute and then unmute, and you can then ask your questions. But we would love to hear from y'all, so please do not feel scared or anything to speak up. We want this to be as similar to an in-gallery walkthrough as we can. However, with the limitations at hand, we're going to try to make this work. I want to introduce myself first. My name is Mark Romano. I'm part of the education department at the San Antonio Museum of Art. And I would also like to introduce Johanna Tesfaye, who is our chat overlord tonight, and she is also part of the education department. So if you want to give them all a little wave, she will be the one who will be reading all the chat questions, letting us know what there is.
Yeah, hey everyone. So I'm typing in the chat box right now, and you can feel free to ask your questions or leave comments during Mark's tour, and I'll make sure that everyone gets to listen to them. And then, but of course, if you are comfortable to unmute yourself and ask the question directly, that is totally fine. Oh yeah, hello everyone, Emily, Linda. I will try to pronounce everyone's names as best as I can. And yeah, so I'm the public programs manager. So this is gonna be really fun. And before Mark starts the tour, I wanted to introduce the cocktails for tonight's evening. The first one is Stone Cold, which is whiskey on the rocks, or anything you have on the rocks. And then we have a Cabernet for our second work of art we're going to be looking at. I have a Chianti this time. Usually I'm a Malbec person. So yeah, so that's what we're going to do. Experience this tour. Please ask questions. And to make sure to keep yourself muted if you aren't saying anything, just again, because it can be distracting when there's so many people on the chat. So yeah, thanks, Mark.
Yes. So before I start this, I want to preface first and foremost, when we look at art, we look at art through different individuals, right? We're all different, and we have different perspectives, we have different ideas. And so the way I am looking through art is through my eyes, right? Through an art historian, but also as a white male. So it will be different, in fact, as for somebody else, just because of the topics at hand, can be just, something to think about, and can be different, taken from different regards. So with that ado, I would like to introduce and talk a bit about the old and the new, and does the gaze change? So first and foremost, what is the gaze? Well, the gaze has to do with sight. It involves us looking at, whether it be one another or vice versa, and it's about contemplation. It's about trying to understand what it is we're seeing and trying to make sense of what that is. I took down something that was very interesting, right? And it was talking about how gaze, is very much about the ability to ponder. Your thoughts are very much involved. So I want you to be very much focused on this whole idea of the gaze, and to think about it from y'all's perspective, but also from the perspective of the painting or the work of art. So for example, our first work of art is our good friend here, Marcus Aurelius. So with that, I want us to take a moment, and I want us to really try to take in what it is we're seeing. So let's take 30 seconds, have a look at this. And after these 30 seconds are over, I want y'all to tell us what it is that you're seeing. What do you see?
Perfection.
You said reflection?
Perfection.
Perfection. Oh, okay. And dive into that for me, please, if you might. Explain this idea of perfection. Why perfection?
This noble person has to have a perfect body, and if you look closely, it really is a perfect body. It's far superior to reality.
So far superior to reality. I really enjoyed that. So would you say this idea about far superior to reality, would that relate to being idealized almost?
Idealized, and probably reflects the idea of divinity.
Okay, reflecting the idea of divinity.
From the chat.
Out how to connect. So
Would you like to go ahead? I don't know who spoke there. Well, you can go ahead, Johanna.
Okay, so from the chat, Shelly has said that it looks to be like a Roman soldier, maybe a general, and that we think that since the feet are bare, that maybe he is semi-divine, and that maybe the robe indicates that he's a senator of some sort.
You know, as a psychiatrist, this Jim Rogers, I'm a little concerned about the absence of his penis. You know, he suffered some mutilation since this was done, you know, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that is, you know, in itself, and, you know, something funny to think about. And that is something, you know, we see all throughout sculpture, you know, whether it be Greek and Roman sculpture. 9 times, I mean, there's a high percentage of that area being, you know, cut off, and or also the nose. The nose is a big one. If you look at a lot of different sculptures, you see a lot of noses missing, and you wonder, why are these, you know, objects missing on these sculptures?
Well, he at least has a nose.
Well, see, he's lucky enough to have his nose.
Sometimes extremities can be easily knocked off or you know, broken off during transport when things are moving around and whatnot. But yes, you're right. Usually that particular area is always the first to go.
And I mean,
I understand. Same for me.
And I mean, you know, these are from such a long time ago as well. I mean, this in itself, if we think about it, what it originally was, this was originally a bronze sculpture. So it in fact wasn't marble as is shown here, as this being a marble statue. It was in fact bronze. And when it was in bronze, it was much stronger. It was a much more durable material. And in fact, do we see this little thing kind of holding it together from the staff to his you know, thigh right there, his quad? This would not have been in fact with the bronze sculpture, because the bronze would have been able to hold itself up much more differently than was in marble. So the fact of the marble, I mean, it's tremendously done. Like the first gentleman was saying about how, you know, this is idealized. This is perfection to its finest. This is showing off who this man was and trying to really just showing the absolute idea of perfection, what it would be to look perfect. I mean, if you're going to make a sculpture, let's ask a question. We'll ask the audience a question. If you were to make a sculpture of yourself, how do you want that sculpture to look? Do you want it to have it looking as y'all's 20% or the 150%? How do you want your sculpture made? How would you like to be remembered?
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Beautifully.
Yeah.
Young and beautiful.
Beautifully, right? You would want to be remembered in this light of just absolute perfection. of being idealized, is having this idea of who you are, and for, you know, for people to remember you as this so-called, you know, perfect figure.
So we have some questions going on here. So people all agreeing that it's a very idealized form. A couple of questions is that, yeah, what is in his right hand?
In his right hand.
Yes, not the staff, but
this thing right here. Okay, so what this is, in fact, let me see if we can look at the other one. It doesn't show a very good one. That is, in fact, a sword. So the sword right here, right? All of, right, how should I preface this? Art loves to have symbols. Symbols represent certain things, right? And so a sword, what would y'all think this sword would symbolize to this character right here? What do y'all think about that?
Power.
Military prowess.
Power, I heard power. What else did somebody say?
Military might, just the ability to fight.
Yeah, military might, strength. If he was a, you know, large standing ruler and fighter, you know, you want to be shown as though you're someone that, you know, other people don't want to mess with, because, you know, you can chop someone up. It is, you know, a direct representation to who Marcus Aurelius was in history, and him being, you know, this large standing emperor and, you know, general in the military who had a lot of power during his time. So, you know, a direct idea of power. So we have the sword, we have the staff. What would the staff represent if we're talking about symbols? What would y'all think a staff would mean?
Authority.
Authority, lovely, yes. Authority, right? If you have a staff, even just the notion of you standing with a staff, don't you feel more powerful? If you were to go out in a hike, right, and you have a staff, you're able to, you know, walk more, climb more distance, because you're using this as support. You have that stability. You are straight, pretty much grounded to the world in which you are in. So also, yeah, very much authority, you know, having this strength all around you. There's one, there's a few more symbols.
It might indicate leadership also.
Yes, very much so. Leadership as well. To show that you're able to rule and to, you know, guard over a large group of people. Very much so.
So Mark, there is a question I think that you were talking about in terms of like figuring out that this is a marble sculpture. Emily is wondering that, you know, there looks like there's seams in this sculpture and it's like pieced together. Do you know maybe why that was?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So I wish we could. So in the actual museum, if you ever do get the chance to, well, when we do get the chance to go back to the museum, not if, please excuse me, you will look at the little placard, and on the placard it shows pretty much a white and gray. And what that means is that the gray parts are things that are added in at later periods of time. So in fact, this wouldn't have all been, you know, from AD 140 to 150. It would have been, you know, probably produced in different parts, whether it be from having the sculpture and then pieces breaking off, and then you have to add new pieces to it. So it pretty much what that means is that this was a different part. It was made at a different period in time, and that they kind of had to, you know, piece it back together to get it to the glory in which it is. However, it's not, as we were, you know, mentioning earlier, it's not fully 100% restored to what it probably originally was. So it kind of, you know, has a lot of like, whether it be kind of iffy topics, as in how far do you go in restoring something? Do you want to restore it 100%, or do you want to restore it only 50%? Does that kind of ruin the original artist's touch to it, or does it make it better? So there's been a lot of, you know, controversy throughout time as to how much restoration goes on in these pieces.
Mark is I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so Helen asked, how do we know it's Marcus Aurelius? Because where was this found originally?
Okay, you know? So those are interesting questions. So I would say the reason we would know would probably be because it would be he would be recognized first and foremost. Second of all, usually very important people are able to get statues done. You couldn't
And I
be
think,
just.
sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think sometimes engravings and yeah, where this was originally displayed helps, because a lot of these things are found through archaeology. So things like hints like that could help us figure out who this person was. But yeah, people would have recognized facially who this dude was.
Is the original bronze?
The original was bronze, correct?
And does it exist, or is it gone?
I would say it does not exist anymore.
Yes.
And this brings up an interesting point. I want to ask y'all this. Why do you think the bronze would not be here today?
Was it melted down and used for other things when,
Yes,
many times
yep.
Rome was pillaged?
And then what do you think it would be used for?
Weapons.
Was that weapons?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Very good. Thank you very much, my audience.
No,
y'all are
sorry.
smart.
In the case of Marcus Aurelius, I think also his facial recognition will come
Mhm.
through the identification of coins where his image would have been printed with his name.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rosario. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge thing, right? Is in these, if you were a Roman emperor, right, and you get your coin minted of you, your face would be on there and it would be a very distinguished face. And in turn, kind of you would get your sculpture done, or, vice versa. So yeah, that's a very good point for identification. So getting back to the bronze, it was very much melted down and used for weapons, because they would think, at that point in time, what's more important, getting your weapons to fight off, the people who are invading you, or some piece of artwork. So
We have some observations that Anne is looking at this and thinking, is his head out of proportion with his body?
okay, that's an interesting idea. I've never really thought about that. So
Smaller than his body.
I mean, also, if we think about it, does his body match his head? Does it have the similarities, or no, it doesn't match? What would be our consensus here?
Looks in good proportion to me.
Yeah, okay, so we have one good proportion, but does it match in terms of, if we look at his body, and we were talking about how perfect it was and how developed it is,
No.
if we look at his face, how does his face look?
According to books, Marcus Aurelius was a very frail, sickly individual.
He was a very frail, yeah, very much so. And also, he probably then wouldn't have the body which he is shown here with if he was, a frail and more sickly individual. So once again, speaking to this whole idea about idealization, and how if you are a ruler and you are an emperor, you want to be displayed in the utmost perfection. You want to be shown as somebody who is strong, who is musculature, who had these, these shapes and, proportions that people aspired to have.
Mark, interject there. I'm noticing his posture and his stance is sort of casual, almost like it's cavalier, and he's relaxed and nonchalant. He's holding his sword, not in a fighting way, almost like a scepter.
Yeah.
He doesn't even need to use it. It's almost very powerful in a weird way.
Yeah, and I think that speaks very much so to the way the artist wanted to display Marcus Aurelius, and how Marcus Aurelius wanted to be displayed himself, right? He wants to be displayed in this kind of relaxed, nonchalant, and in terms of art, right, this is a contrapposto form, right, where his, hips are kind of out, and then, his leg stands. This is also to show just how powerful he was, how he doesn't care. And even if we speak once again to the whole idea about the gaze, he is not looking towards us, right, towards the viewer. He is looking above us. He is looking over us. It's almost as if he is looking out to the entire world and how he's going to conquer everything, right? And we are just, peasants in his way, and he will move us out of the way. So it's like, very much speaks to who Marcus Aurelius is, how Marcus Aurelius wants to be shown, and it's really taking that all in.
So I had a private message of when someone's kind of like commenting that, that these sculptures and Greek sculpture, Roman sculptures would have been painted. And yes, this is 100% true. Almost all Roman statues would have been painted completely, as in there's no white marble that would have existed at this particular time that it was made. So if you can imagine this work of art with, maybe like a red robe and skin tone and with actual eyes painted onto them, it might have a different effect on you than maybe this white one-tone statue. So yes.
And that's an interesting thing to talk about as well, because if we look at this statue and how, just thinking from a skill set, how wonderfully done it is, can you imagine it with color and how much it would just pop and come to life? It really is truly as though, this is a time, this is like a snapshot in time, right? It is a moment that has been taken and everything is frozen. I think it really, speaks to the wonderful skill set of the artist and just how incredibly well done it was.
And to answer another question asking why isn't there color on it, it could be due to time. Over time, paint can chip. If you think about, this is made in the year 140. So over time, things chip away. And to think about the consistency of paints back then were much different than what was happening in the Renaissance or later. So it's, sun exposure, nature, things happen. But I do have another question for you, Mark, from Dustin, Dr. Dustin. Do you know how long it would have taken to create a statue like this?
That's an interesting idea, right? Because you have to take in consideration that in a lot of art, we think of art as being a one-person kind of thing. And in fact, that's wrong. A lot of art throughout time, people had extraordinarily large workshops. And, for example, I think one of the prime examples is Rubens, right? Rubens, would produce these enormous paintings that were just tremendous in size, and he would just bust them out one after the other after the other. And the reason he was able to do that was because he had such a large workshop and so many people working with him in order to do these paintings. So we can't, be for sure about, how many people that were working on this, work of art. But I would presume that there would have been more than probably 3 or 4 people working on it. And that kind of would have, given ideas about whether, taken a few months to make it. But I don't think we can really be 100% for sure on how long something like this would have taken.
And that answer lends itself to another question someone, or at least a comment someone said from an iPad, that this head might have been a part of another sculpture and attached later. And why I'm not sure about this particular sculpture, that definitely did happen with Roman sculptures, because, if you're going through emperors and thinking about how long it might take, it may just be easier to knock the head off of one and put your head on there. Just to, get your, exactly what Helen's saying, like this propaganda kind of out of saying how you're a strong ruler.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a true statement, right? They would knock one off, throw on another head, and there you go. It's the same, each sculpture had the same ideas about what they wanted to follow, of wanting to show the strength, to show that they were a ruler, to show that they were, powerful, and, the facial features, right? Even in themselves, probably Marcus Aurelius did not, 100% look like this. He probably looked uglier, right, per se, if that's the word, right? Because he wanted to be idealized, right? He wanted to show his best features. And it's just like, Photoshop, like we do today, right? We do, retouches, and we, try to make ourselves look as perfect as possible. So I would expect, something similar to have been done back then.
And another question is, why was this copy made?
Why was it made? Oh, that's a very good question. Go ahead, Johanna.
Yeah, so because when Mark was saying that these bronze statues were being melted down for, weapons and other other things, most likely I will say majority of Roman sculptures are in fact copies of Greek originals. It doesn't necessarily do anything with propaganda, Helen, but it's just like the thinking of like use of materials and reusing things. A lot of Rome stole a lot from Greece back in the day. But we also have another question asking, is this hairstyle normal or is it a wig?
I would presume it was normal. I don't think it would have been a wig.
It is normal, and I remember in AP art history, there's a style of Roman hair too in our galleries. I think we have an example of it. It starts with an F, but it's like super curly. It's kind of this bonnet thing. Curls were popular, I guess, back then. Maybe it's some boyish charm for the gays. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you can very much see how, pronounced his hair is. And, speaking to his face and how his facial construction is. This leads me to one question I want to ask you. So if we look at his face, would we say his face looks old or young?
I was just typing a question about that.
Okay. Well, it's your question. Tell me your question, Emily.
Well, I was gonna say, like, he looks young in this, because I was doing some surreptitious Googling on the side, just about him in general, and like sculptures that popped up, he's got a beard and he looks a lot older. So this looks like he could be in teens or young 20s. Is that
So it is, in fact, this is his younger years. But why would he want to be displayed as younger? Why would you want to be shown as younger? I'm sorry, Rosario? Did you say
Don't we all?
Yeah, don't we all? Yeah, very much so. But as a ruler, right? As a ruler, why would you want to be displayed younger?
Because there's strength in being young.
There's strength in being young, and then also longevity. Right? If you want a ruler, do you want him to be living there for a year, 2 years, or do you want him to, live as long as he can? If he's a good ruler, if he's a successful ruler, you want him there for a while.
It's also a message, especially back then. There were a lot of folks vying for power. The message is, I'm around for a while, guys.
Yep, very much so, right? And it's almost as if it's like you don't want to mess with me because I'll be here for a while, so, you don't want to get in my way. So very much so. But also, there's another thing about, whether it be like sculptures and faces, in that, what would it mean with a sculpture that had an older face? What does it mean with older faces? Because you could make a point for Marcus Aurelius to have an old face as well, because that would signify something else.
Well, I have an answer.
You have an answer?
Yes, I do. He has a contemplative affect. So he has the structure of a young face, but look at his eyes, and mainly his eyes, and he's a contemplative. He has wisdom.
Yes, very much so, right? And that would kind of lead to the whole idea of having, whether it be an older, more developed face, right? Because you would have lived for a longer life, which in turn would have given you more wisdom. But having these eyes, right, that are very, they're into thought, they're thinking. This once again, speaks to how Marcus Aurelius wanted to be shown and how he wanted to kind of have that power.
And Marcus Aurelius in history is known as the thinking ruler, probably the only thinking philosopher that we've ever had in the history of mankind.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, Marcus Aurelius, that's what he was known for, and he wrote these books on philosophy, and I think it was that he was a Stoic, and he actually, I was reading something about him last week, and he spoke, or he said something similar to kind of like the situation in which we're in that, you know, he said that in order to learn and to become a better person, you have to go through hardships. And, you know, this hardship in which we're in, you know, all, you know, being away from everyone and being, you know, locked at home, you know, we have to take something out of this, and we have to learn to become, you know, better because of it. So I think, you know, kind of speaking to the times in which we're in, you know, we can take, you know, some knowledge from Marcus Aurelius. And also that he was into meditation as well, or something else. So.
What did you say?
He's into meditation. He wrote a few books on meditation. So also something that we could be doing in these times, right? We're at home, why not do a little meditating? So who knows? So do we have any last final questions on our first figure here before we move on to the next one? Okay, well, our next figure here, once again, like we did for the first one, if we can take a moment and just have a look at it. And I'm going to ask you the same question about what it is that you see. So take a moment, take everything in, and try to understand what it is that we're seeing.
or 2011 or 1979. Oh, that was it, 1979.
Really? Okay, so we're going to do that.
So, what do we see?
It was near
here?
the elevators.
This was near the elevators, yes. So you remember seeing this in real life, then, Daniel?
Yes.
And what do you think about it in real life, as in what you're seeing in the PowerPoint today? Does it do it justice?
You know, it's about 1/13 the size, but it's a good picture anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this in the gallery, you know, it truly is one of my favorite pieces in the way it just, you know, radiates and glows. Oh, look, you have a glass of wine there. Perfect, right? Perfect for our next piece right here. Excellent. There we go. So what do we see? What do we see? Let's talk about this.
So Linda is commenting on how beautiful this woman is, and, you know, seductive.
So seductive. So you're speaking to the way that you see her face, the way she's looking at you, beauty, whether it be, you know, her facial features.
I take it back. She means nude, but not really seductive.
Nude, but not really seductive.
Yes.
Okay. So why is she not seductive? Can you tell me about the? I'm interested in this not being seductive part.
No,
Because she's not covering herself up. She's covering herself up, so she's not being seductive to me.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like, I mean, also another thing to take in consideration is her posture, right? And it's as if she was, you know, facing the wall prior, and then we, the audience, you know, kind of barged in on her, and, you know, she's kind of covering herself up in this moment. And she kind of looks at us. Yes, Johanna.
Dustin's noticing that her facial expression is more serious.
More serious. Yeah. Also, you know, I think that also speaks once again to, you know, the work of art, and it is as if we are walking in. We're kind of interrupting, you know, her meditative state. You have some more questions?
But she seems very comfortable. Also,
she does seem comfortable. Yeah, you know, she's relaxed in bed. She's reclined there. Yeah, very much. How have we seen? So let's think about this. As an audience, have we seen images similar to this?
Especially in Italy.
In Italy.
I think I've
Okay.
seen some sculptures that are a lot like this, like of Aphrodite or
Yeah.
Greek characters.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, this is a very recurring thing throughout art, this theme. And the name of this piece is Venus, right? Which in turn is the Roman name for Aphrodite, in turn of Greek. Very much so. Very much seen throughout Greece and Rome. Yeah, Johanna.
And not to sidetrack, but people are noticing that, the use of light is very impressive, and that Doe isn't sure of how to determine
Calm down,
where
Mr. Fox, you can eat.
a source of light is in room. And then Helen, the contrast between her very touchy body and guarded face.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know.
Proportions seem almost perfect.
Yeah, I mean, speaking once again to the other piece that we looked at with proportion and how this whole idea about idealize and kind of speaking towards the idea of beauty, I think this is also a piece that follows suit in that way. Lighting, I think this is also a big thing. I mean, lighting throughout time really can make something. Whether it be Caravaggio and his use of lighting and how he dramatizes something so much, and it's so powerful. And even today, when we take, pictures on our phone or pictures with cameras, lighting makes a huge role in the way we look. We want to make sure we get good lighting for it. So once again, I think Claudio Bravo, being the painter in which he was, who is a hyper-realist painter, which means he wants to get something as close to reality as possible. He wants to be that camera. He wants to be that person who can emulate real life on a piece of paper, pretty much. So his skill set, is top of the line. And so his ability in order to capture light, in order to give that kind of creamy warmness, and it's as if we can really feel Venus, coming out of the painting towards us, and we can feel that warmth which she has, is a tremendous job.
I'll add in there that Claudio Bravo is a hyper-realistic painting. Representation can sometimes be found in Baroque art, and if you think of maybe like Northern Baroque art, that's like Vermeer. So Girl with the Pearl Earring. And these artists too were thinking about depicting in life as realistic as possible. So just wanted to put that in there.
Yeah, I mean, throughout art, artists really want to get this whole idea about, skill set. And that really leads to that question about what is art? And what is the purpose of art? Is it to become this, skill set god to where you can produce paintings that are just so lifelike? Or is it, the meaning and the thought behind painting? So I think that really, speaks so much to history and what history has to say. But I mean, just the job in which, Claudio Bravo does, we can all recognize that. There's one thing I've always said about this painting, and it's that it's so simple, yet so complex. And when I say simple, I mean in terms of what is in the room. All we see is, 2 mattress frames, 2 pillows, some sheets, and that's it. We see a wall, we see flooring, but there's not a whole lot of anything else in this piece. And what does that do to the piece, with it being so simple in terms of objects and placement?
I think it brings it to life.
Yeah. Talk.
If you see the sheets, they certainly look like most sheets look in the morning.
Yeah.
They're wrinkled. They have certain folds there that are very realistic. Likewise with the pillows. But what I love most are her feet. because they have been, she has been walking barefooted.
Yeah.
Those feet have not been washed since she was stepping on whatever type of floor there was.
Very
When
true.
you were talking about what drew me to her, it's just immediately when I drop everything else and my mind goes blank, everything goes to her eyes and her expression and her piercing eyes, and you know, her, it's almost admonishing. It's very powerful as well.
She's very,
and I mean, I think this really speaks to the work of art, and in turn speaks to the whole idea about the gaze. You know, what we first set off to do, and the gaze is being so powerful, right? Not even our gaze looking in on it, but her gaze looking out towards us. It's as if she can read our soul. She is the one piercing into each and every one of us, and she is understanding us. And she is, I don't even know if judging is the right word, but she is trying to do something to us. And we can feel that. We can feel that from a painting, and it's just truly spectacular. But once again, you know, speaking to Rosario's comment as well about the feet, you know, this is just the skill set in which Claudio Bravo had to do, and to give Venus, or whoever she is, this sort of lifelike quality, once again, you know, is truly one to none. Let's see what else here. This is a little close-up we can see as well, of once again that gaze and how she's really looking out towards us.
I have a comment about this.
Yes, please.
She is not, many times when we have a picture of a nude, it's like, how does a man interpret a woman reclining nude? No, 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 no. This is a woman reclining nude, contemplating all of us, especially a man. She is in charge. It's fabulous.
Yeah, it truly is. And it's also interesting to think about is that Claudio Bravo being a male who painted her. I think that really, you know, makes you think about, you know, the power behind this piece, because it truly is if she is a lifelike figure, excuse me, and she is looking out towards us. She is the one contemplating us. She is the one challenging us. And I mean, it shows how powerful that gaze can be, how that gaze can pierce through so much and to really touch us in that sort of way. So,
do you not see the gaze as creating distance as well? She looks through us, but that pushes us back. It's almost as if she's saying to me, okay, you've come into my room, what do you want?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that definitely does. And like I was saying, challenging, right? It challenges us. And I really think because we are the ones who entered her room, we are the audience who disrupted her, you know, it gives her a certain feel, a certain characteristic, a certain way in which she is expressing that towards us. And we can feel that. And I think that's part of the work of art. And I think that's what Claudio Bravo was attempting to do. Do we have anything from the chat?
Well, no, we just had a surprise member say that she thought it was a photograph.
Yeah.
She just realized it's a painting.
Yeah.
That's, you know, incredible.
And once again, you know, speaking to the skill set of trying to be hyper realistic. So what I'm going to do next
I think she was nursing her child. And came upon her. Restful and protecting her breast for her baby. It reminds me of the picture of Demi Moore and Vanity Fair many years ago.
Okay, I don't know of that one. Okay. Yeah. Well, very interesting. I can see what you mean, and that definitely could be the case. And I think this also leads to the idea about this image can lead to so many different interpretations. It can lead to so many different ideas about what is happening. And we don't know what is happening. We have no idea. And it is up to us, us as the viewer to try to make sense of all of this, to try to come up with our own ideas about what it is we're seeing. And I think that's the fun part about this, is we can come up with the story. We can come up with how it is that she is feeling and how she can express herself towards us. And I think that's a truly tremendous thing. And I think that's the purpose of this piece.
So we have some comments that a member pointed out that it's interesting to see that the painting shows where the sun has not hit her body, where it's like the parts that would be normally clothed.
Okay, so you can see her tan lines, right? And
go for it. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that can also speak to, you know, what she does, or that can lead to the idea about what is her job, what does she do? You know, once again, leading us to have even more questions about who she is. And it's like these little clues. They don't, you know, kind of complete the puzzle, but they just allow us to ask more. And it's truly something special. And it's a journey for each and every one of us to go through on our own terms, because we all have different, you know, skill sets. We all have different experiences in life that lead us to come to these, to our own conclusions.
And this next question is Claudio Bravo known mostly for nudes? And if we know, was this someone he knew?
I'm not sure about if this was somebody he knew. And no, he wasn't known mostly for nudes. He is known for this whole style of hyperrealism. He does so we have another piece in the museum also by Claudio Bravo, and it's across the room from the Bravo. And it is of sheets, like these kind of cloth sheets. And it's a still life with sheets, and there's like a bag. And the color is just beautiful. And it's so realistic. Once again, you know, this whole idea about style and him being a hyper-realist and him trying to be as realistic as possible. So he really tried to emulate being a camera, you know, being himself a camera and able to do something so wonderful. So, do we have a last question, or?
We do have one last question,
yeah.
I think, which I also would like to help answer.
Yeah.
Someone asked, what's the point of hyperrealism if you could just take a photograph to get the same thing?
Do you want to answer this, or do you want me to?
Sure. So my background's in art history, photography, and Northern Baroque. So you're right that photography was just now kind of getting its thing. This is painting 1979, so we definitely have colored photographs, but I think it's just the level of skill that he wanted to show. Oh, someone has to leave. Bye.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming. I think that he was just really inspired by Renaissance and Baroque paintings, and I think he was really trying to emulate that style of realism because, as you know, Renaissance and Baroque are some of the most famous established art movements, and it's kind of the old masters come from those two time periods. So I think that it's kind of putting his name with old masters, essentially, right? Kind of elevating his status as an artist, almost.
Mm-hmm. And it's, you know, he possesses this ability to create something with this detail, and I mean that is a skill set in itself, right? And it's a way, I don't know if showing off is the right word, but it's a way of him showing his skill. And that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to emulate, like Johanna was saying, these old masters, and to just show what art can do. And I mean, if we were to look at whether it be a photograph and a painting, they possess different characteristics, right? With a painting, you can get a richer sense of color, and there's a three-dimensionality to it because of, you know, paint pigments. So it kind of, you know, gives you two different perspectives, and they can never be, you know, one and the same. So I think they both hold their certain places in time.
Mark, I wonder if you or Johanna know about the history of photography and whether this was a time point when photography had reached a status where it was recognized as an art form, if this was a struggle at this point at all. It just came to mind. It's a little bit of a tangent.
Yeah,
Take it or leave it.
of course. So photography would have been, in this period, would have been known as an art form for sure. Do you want to add to that?
I do. I'll answer it in the comments. Because we do have another question. I'm looking at the time. So look forward to that answer in the comments. But then we have another question that leads us into the next work of art, I think, when it's what was he trying to convey by calling the painting Venus?
Okay, so perfect. Lovely transition. So thank you very much for that one. So this whole idea about emulating art throughout time. Artists love to take ideas from different pieces and to make something of their own. So this idea of Venus, right, as we were talking about earlier, definitely did hold its place in, Greek and Roman history and mythology. And once again, we see here a work done by Titian, who was part of the Renaissance. And in fact, this is not in our collection. This is from, this is in the Uffizi in Florence in Italy. And this, once again, emulates a certain flow to her, a similar style of the nude reclining woman on a bed. And in this, and then once again, the Venus of Urbino, right, relating to the status of who she was, of being a goddess. But this is done in a very different way than what we saw of Claudio Bravo's, in which there's a lot more going on in here, and how each little thing or each object in here holds some sort of symbol, right? Holds some sort of status, and whether it be the dog, meaning fidelity, loyalty, or, the roses as well, being part of life, really speaks to who the Venus of Urbino is. And so while they are very different in terms of, whether it be her back is facing us, whereas the Venus of Urbino, she's facing towards us, we can look at their facial features and we can look into their gaze and how different the gaze is. How we were talking about Claudio Bravo's Venus in her gaze, almost challenging, piercing, kind of confronting us. Whereas if we look at the Venus of Urbino, how do we interpret her gaze?
So from the comments, I'm just taking a little snippet out of it that, Linda's saying that Venus is flaunting her sexuality in this one.
Yeah, I mean, also the hand placement of her hand towards the pelvis area right here. Yeah, once again, flaunting who she is, and her being Venus, the goddess of love, really speaks to who she is, right? And I think that's what Titian wanted to do, and he wanted to show her. Also, if we think about it, there's maids in the background as well. These also speak to the wealth of her, right? The opulent fabrics here too, speaking to how wealthy she would have been in just the status of this woman here.
This, the center of this portrait has, she has almost more of a seductive look than the Venus before this, who, I don't know, like you were talking about, almost was like, okay, you're here, but why? And she's like looking through you. This one is definitely more of a, I don't know.
Yeah, this one is more bringing us in. It's more of a friendly confrontation, and almost speaking more seductive, right?
She's
it's
very inviting.
More inviting. Thank you, Rosario. Yes, very much so, right? She's more inviting us into the piece, and she's trying to bring us closer. Whereas the Claudio Bravos, it's like, wait, no, get away from here. What are you doing in here? Why did you come? Why did you disturb me? So once again, speaking very much so to Venus being the goddess of love, of being seductive, of trying to bring us in, to bring us close. Do we have anything?
Can you talk a little bit about the figures in the background? The child is, frankly, puzzles me.
Yeah, so I would presume both of them would be some sort of maids or servants. And we can see it looks as though she's kind of getting a gown out of the dress. And I would presume there would also be other types of clothing inside these different caskets. And I would presume that they would be going to help put clothes on Venus here. So that's what I would presume would be happening. And that idea also leads to the next piece, once again, about the whole idea of maids, because as we were talking about, art loves to emulate other pieces of art. And in fact, this next piece, once again, does a similar idea of what we've been seeing. This right here is Edouard Manet's Olympia. And this is not in our collection also. This is in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, France. And this was a very controversial, very interesting, very thought-provoking image of the time. And Edouard Manet actually looked back on Titian. As we can see, it's very, very similar. Posture's the same, has certain elements which are very similar. As we saw in Titian's Venus of Urbina, we have the dog. If we look at Manet's, we see a little black cat, right? So kind of giving opposites to what it is we're seeing. We have a maid right here, this black maid, and she is, you know, also kind of emulating the maids in this piece as well. And Edouard Manet really wanted to humanize these people. So Olympia was a very, she was a sex worker in Paris at the time, and she was pretty famous. And so when Edouard Manet did this piece, he was going to put it in the salon, which was a way of artists to show off their works of art. And it was, in fact, it was admitted, but it wasn't very popular. It sparked a lot of controversy because since the Venus of Urbina was called the Venus of Urbina, meaning that it was a Venus and that it was about mythology, that was okay. That's okay. That's great. As long as it holds some mythological value, that's wonderful. But you do not want to put a sex worker in your piece because that does not follow mythological value. So if Edouard Manet would have named it Venus, okay, maybe that would have been better and then it would have been fine. But because he wanted to really speak to the human characteristics of both characters here in this piece of artwork, he gave it to us straight. And this kind of is the turning point of art. When we go from, you know, having this idea about skill set and hyperrealism, and then we go to Impressionism. And I think Edouard Manet was a great transitioning point between the two. And where it's not 100% impressionistic, we can start to look into the details of the body right here in the rest of the painting, in the sense that art critics at the time would state that it was unfinished, how it wasn't fully completed, whereas this looks as though it's a much more completed work of art. So it really spoke to the time. And Johanna, jump in here and help me out with some of the other ideas about this, because there is just so much behind Olympia and what this holds.
Yeah, so Mark is totally on point when saying that this was a game-changing work of art. It shocked people. It was like, what are you doing, Manet? Tons of displaying sex work in a very, I would say, proud way. But he also showed her servant, actually is a familiar, recognizable face. Her name was, that name, but she was also in other portraits by Manet, and meant that's pretty radical for the time, given the race relations at that time. Usually Black people, brown people were hypersexualized. They were exotified in many ways. So to show her as a Black woman in her, in a position, just as a servant, just being who she is and where she's at in the social social variety of the time was pretty radical, and you just don't do that, you know? So Manet was really interesting for doing this, and he considered this woman to be very beautiful. And as I said, she sat for him in different works of art, as, you know, did the Olympia, the main sex worker. So she's really interesting. Oh, the maid's name is Laure, L-A-U-R-E, maybe Lara, I don't know. But there's a whole exhibition that just came out that was called Posing Modernity, and they start with this painting because this is kind of like that game changer painting, and it was talking about Black people in the backgrounds of a lot of paintings and lack of discussion around that. So yes, pivotal moment right now.
Yes, thank you so much, Johanna. And you know, this being in France is very similar to what was happening in England with the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. And so I know we recently had the Victorian Radicals exhibition at SAMA, and that spoke very much in turn to this whole idea about shaping modernity, shaping how we see or how art is done, showing that it doesn't have to follow these set rules of what art should be, but allowing us to express ourselves in a certain way and to be free from all of this. So it really did, you know, kind of shape things and open doors to the rest of art, into the way we see art today. So very, very crucial. And we lead to this piece right here, which just shows, you know, the trifecta of the three, showing all their, you know, similarities, but also showing how different they each are. And it really, really speaks to this idea about how there's so much in art, and how artists, you know, love to emulate one another and to really make something of their own. And here we have all of them, or a few of them. I shouldn't say all of them, because there's so many. I mean, if you're to Google Venus on Google, right, there's just going to be a whole, you know, pages and pages of different works of art depicting Venus and different ways they want to be depicted.
We do have a question in
course.
terms of, do you know how, I'm assuming, Dustin, you're talking about Manet's work of art and how that was received during the Civil War America. So do you know, Mark?
No, I wouldn't. I don't think there would have been a huge connection, just because in America, since it was far away from Paris, of course, there would be artists who would have known of Manet and who he was, and they would have seen Olympia. But I don't think it would have been a huge influence. But that's just my opinion.
No, I agree. I think we have to remember, you know, this is the late 19th century. Word gets around not quickly. So someone would have had to have been in Paris, seen it at the salon or wherever, and then bring back this idea with them.
Yeah.
But
I completely, you know, agree with that. So I want to say, on a final note, I hope that we can all relax and lounge as hard as these women are here in these paintings during these quarantine times. And I want to give a wonderful cheers to everyone here, and thank you all for coming to our second happy hour tour. And we really appreciate all your support with the museum, and we hope you and your loved ones are all safe. And thank you again for coming. Cheers, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, very enjoyable. Thank you very much.
Yes, have a great one. Bye-bye.